Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about The Last of Us Season 1 Episode 5. It's called Endure and Survive. So full spoilers for the episode as always. And just a small bit of behind the curtains here. That is my second take of the intro. Because when I said it the first time, I went to say the titles, Endure and Survive. And because Survive ends very similar to the word 5, I got confused for a second and thought I'd already said it, or that I said survive instead of 5 a second before. This is not important, I just thought it was amusing. Anyway, so obviously, weird time slot this week because of the Super Bowl. Last of Us got pushed forward a couple of days. I was a little worried as to when I was going to be able to get to it, but luckily I've gotten to it quite quickly. It'll go out, today, which is Saturday. I thought I might have to wait till Sunday, but here we are, and this is very much the second half of the Kansas City story and kind of wraps that up. It ends pretty much exactly where I thought it was going to end, knowing the story from the game, of course. I'll talk about the comparisons a little bit later, because there's quite a bit of differences in this section to talk about, but we get more, obviously, context on Kathleen's group, this resistance that rose up in Kansas City, and how Henry's tied to that. What's interesting is that once again we started without a prologue scene before the opening title sequence, and that's now the majority of the episodes. 1 and 2 did it back to back, and I thought that was going to be every episode, and I thought maybe 3 was just a special one because it was already a long episode, but then 4 and 5 have also not had it either. But what's interesting is that after the opening title sequence, we do actually start with a flashback. Effectively, we start with kind of the backstory of Sam and Henry, and we see a little bit of the resistance happening, which is only about 10 days before Joel and Ellie arrive. And it kind of keeps going until it intersects with our main story. We hear the truck crash from last episode from Sam and Henry's perspective, and then obviously they go up and hold Joel and Ellie at gunpoint, and that's where we continue from there once they get there. But there's a good few minutes of setting that up and getting to that point and getting to know this pair of brothers. And I thought to myself, couldn't we have had that before the opening title sequence? And you probably could have. You could have probably ended right before the title sequence where the episode ended last week, effectively, and then picked up afterwards. My only guess as to why they didn't do that is because maybe they made a blanket rule that before the opening title sequence, if there's going to be anything, it'll always be before the apocalypse. Maybe that's the rule they're playing with, at least this season. I don't know. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe this is just a choice they made. But because they did it for 2 episodes, I was thinking about it, and then this episode still kind of started with a flashback, even though it was obviously much more recent compared to the flashbacks at the start of the first 2 episodes, because it was just in the last week or so. But yeah, a lot of stuff to say about this, and most of it very positive. The one negative thing that I would very much say is really just kind of the same sentiment I had last episode, is that Kathleen and her group are appreciated as fleshing out kind of the enemies in this part of the story. And I actually do really appreciate in this episode in particular how it ties her into the main themes of The Last of Us as a story, particularly the idea of her losing someone she cares about, the one person she was closest to, which is her brother, we find out about, and also the idea of revenge, which is very much what she's all about. And then something, a really great comparison to Bill and Frank is, and this was actually a comment from one of the viewers on episode 3, is that Bill ultimately, while he's not happy about it at first, he accepts Frank's decision by the end of that episode. He accepts this is what Frank wants and chooses to accept it, and he makes his own choice based on that, but he doesn't make a choice that goes against what Frank wanted in the first place. Whereas here, what we find out from Kathleen is that she is going against her brother's wishes. Her brother, who was the leader of this resistance before she took over, was turned in by Sam. That's why, sorry, not Sam. Sam's the kid, the younger one. Turned in by Henry, and that's why she wants Henry, because she's determined to get him. And we see in the backstory that she's killed all of the informants, all of the quote-unquote rats who gave information to Fedra, and she especially wants him because her brother was who he turned in. And that's all, interesting enough stuff. But I think thematically what's really interesting about that is that she explains to her henchmen that her brother said not to seek revenge, that he wanted to forgive, if not specifically Henry, then just in general, forgive the people who... It seems like that this resistance took a darker turn once she got in charge, once she became the leader. And notably, and this is the interesting caveat to this, is that we can look at that as an audience and say, oh, it got worse because she's more vicious. But they also got results. You know, there's kind of like a sad truth to it, that this resistance was a thing for a long time and didn't achieve anything. But fairly quickly, once she was in charge and she had this anger because of what had happened to her brother, they were able to accomplish something because they were willing to go further than they had before. And we see that, you know, in the flashbacks early on, we see like the bodies of the Fedra agents being dragged with knives in their bodies. It feels like this resistance were really violent, and they kind of look bad. And that's the other, you know, the other theme of The Last of Us that does come up in this episode, particularly Henry brings it up, is this idea, like, are you a bad person because you did bad things to survive? You know, he has a line at one point where he says, I did bad guy things, so I guess I'm a bad guy. That is very much a question that comes up a lot in this show, or in the story in general, from both the show and the game. And I think that was raised kind of interestingly here as well. And I was just noticing these extra layers and themes that, you know, I think the idea of revenge has been hinted at before with Joel's, like, you know, the fear of Joel's retaliation when Tess was hurt back in episode 1. That hinted that, yeah, he does go for revenge. He often does. But it's not been super heavy in the story as of yet, but I feel like this episode really started to, okay, we're bringing in the revenge angle. So, but yeah, that comparison to Bill and Frank, I think, is a big deal. Is that this is someone who, she clearly loved her brother. It was a genuine, you know, brother-sister bond. We see her in the bedroom where she was growing up with her brother, and this was a big deal that he was taken away from her, and it's turned her into effectively this monster. She's become this cold person to survive, and she's not respecting her brother's wishes. She's going full nuclear in the way that she feels is right. And part of that maybe because the brother's not around to talk her out of it anymore, but that's very much the big key difference between her and then Bill and Frank, which is that Bill accepted Frank's decision regardless of how much he didn't like it in the first place. So differences to reactions to love and the loss of that person that you love. Well, again, it doesn't have to be romantic love. You know, Joel and Ellie, of course, isn't a romantic love. It can be just a family love. Henry and Sam are brothers. You know, there's all different types of this stuff. So having said all that, I do think that Kathleen and her group are maybe I don't think they're bad. I do think they're the one thing that's been changed or it's been added that feels just a little bit lesser than everything else. Just because it leads to a couple of contrivances or a couple of like coincidences in the plot that feel a little bit more, I guess melodramatic is the way I'd put it. Like, there's kind of a culmination towards the end of this episode, and the scene itself is mostly great, but there's a little bit of that sort of Hollywood timing where you know, the heroes are saved just in the last second because the thing that was set up last episode is kind of like, you know, the swarm of the infected and the clickers, and of course the bloater, which we'll get to. Obviously, once they came out, the scene was great, but we have this kind of standoff with her beforehand, where she's sort of yelling for Henry to give himself up, and that felt a bit more generic to me. And I think a lot of the scenes where her and her group felt a little bit more generic than everything else in the show. And like I say, I think there's a genuine attempt to make all of it feel relevant to the themes of the show, and some of it feels you know, very specifically relevant to key themes in the show, multiple themes, and so I can't really fault it for the effort or the attempts. I think it's just that inherently it doesn't feel as interesting, and I was sort of thinking about this section of the game specifically and how it compares, and this is a big part of the game. These 2 episodes covered quite a big stretch of the game, and there's a lot more encounters with enemies, both human and clickers, and I think the human enemies that are hunting you because you killed some of the people when you first arrived, we never really get like a leader. We never get that, and I understand why the show wanted to do that, and I think it's neat that it gets to expand upon that. But it did make me wonder that if they benefited almost from not having this voice and not having this clear, you know, it kind of feels almost like this like a never-ending stream of bad people because the world's full of bad people. Kind of like in the same way that this is a very different thing to bring up, but it's the same reason why in the Terminator, like I never wanted Skynet, the AI that created the Terminators, to have like a face, a voice, or a personality. That there's something inherently scarier about there just being this never-ending force coming from this source, because and I think, and it's not so much that obviously there is like a leader of this group, obviously there would be, but the idea that to the main characters in the story, they represent that there's always going to be bad people out there that you have to deal with. And don't get me wrong, this idea that they might have been justified in retaliating on Fedra the way they did does also add to the themes of the show, because this big thing of like Joel's done bad things in the past to protect people, to survive. He's become someone that he's maybe not proud of in those moments, and the people around him became scared of. Everything we hear in this episode about Fedra, specifically in Kansas City, not Fedra as a whole, but even Joel says he's heard rumors that Fedra in Kansas City were really bad, like they were bastards. And Henry confirms that by saying that they were murdering and raping people for decades. And that they were the worst of the worst, and it was really kind of this fascist regime that, or maybe even worse than that, depending on how you look at it, that were in control of this area. And you immediately think, oh, is Henry kind of a shithead then for collaborating with them and giving them information? And Joel immediately, he immediately calls him a rat and says he doesn't work with rats. He immediately judges him for it, which is kind of rich coming from him. But of course, as the episode goes on, that's broken down for Joel, because he starts to see that he did it to protect his little brother. So before he even gets details of what the protection entailed, he in some level understands protecting a child, because of course he does, right? That, like, he lost his daughter, now he's protecting Ellie. He recognizes that in Henry and kind of starts to trust that a little bit as the episode goes on. So it's not, basically there's a lot of shades of grey is effectively what I'm getting at, and there's a lot of like what you become to survive, but then alternatively, like, when do you go too far and when do you have to try and regain or keep your humanity, all that kind of good stuff. So I don't want to skip too ahead with Joel and Henry. I want to kind of go through that in order. I've got most of the Kathleen stuff out of the way, I think, that I wanted to bring up. So yeah, it's not bad that it ties into the themes, but I just didn't think it clicked and I loved it as much as the rest of the stuff that's been in the show. And that includes the rest of this episode. I think everything with Joel and Ellie, again, is great. Their interactions with Henry and Sam, also great. Henry and Sam obviously get a bit more time here than they did in the game, especially before they meet Joel and Ellie. And they made me care about them even more than they did in the game by showing Henry trying to be a good big brother to Sam and trying to make him not scared. And then the idea that we introduced this child who's got this extra vulnerability by being deaf is, scary. It makes him instantly kind of vulnerable, and you want to root for him. And knowing how this episode was going to end, because I've played the game, did make it kind of, there was this kind of knot in your stomach the whole time. It's kind of there. So, I had a lot of fun with the early stuff here. I had a lot of fun with like Joel saying that they don't have a problem because they've not hurt you. Because Henry says, we've not hurt you, so we're going to put our guns down and we're okay, right? And Joel says, yeah, we're okay. And Henry's like, I don't like the way you said that. And Ellie has to jump in and be like, no, he has asshole voice. He always sounds like that. I laughed a lot when she turns to him and says, right, Joel? And he goes, yeah, right. And like he still sounded like he wanted to kill Henry, and it made me laugh. And it was almost, and it made me laugh because they've set it up so well that he is this mistrusting. And it was a really funny beat in the middle of an otherwise, reasonably tense moment between these characters. But I think it's interesting though, again, what Ellie brings to Joel's character is that Ellie is there to reason with him and be this heart that he doesn't have, that he lost a long time ago. She's the one who wants to help these other two people, and that's shown throughout the episode. It comes up a number of times as we go through. And ultimately, Henry's got a way that he thinks he can get out of the city using tunnels, which Joel thinks is a terrible idea, because one of the reasons why we've not seen many infected in the city is because apparently Fedra here drove them all underground, and that's where they've been. And that kind of ties into the coming up through the ground that we were kind of hinting at last episode. But Henry's heard that they've cleared it out, and it's probably not going to be many clickers or anything down there. They even used the word clicker, which Ellie and Joel I don't think had heard yet, because she describes a clicker, and Henry's like, you survived a clicker and survived? Oh my. I said survived a clicker and survived. That was a stupid sentence. You know what I meant. So they make this plan, and they go sneaking around, and they go into the tunnels and stuff. And this is very much from the game. There's a lot of encounters that happened in the city that the show didn't do, including one with a bloater, which is I thought we were going to get, because I thought that's what they were saving the bloater for, and they ended up mixing it with the sniper section, which I was excited to get to, because it's a really fun tense moment in the game. Which I was really surprised that there was no enemies inside the underground section, because they find the sort of the children's like playroom bedroom area, right? And we hear that some communities tried to go underground when the apocalypse happened, and that's what this is. And it gives the kids a chance to sort of get friendly and be nice with one another. I think it's interesting that as soon as they get into the basement sort of area, Joel tells Ellie to bring out her gun, and it's just a stark contrast of like Sam and Henry's relationship to Joel and Ellie, is that he's already at that point with her, and she's trying to make friends with this kid, and she's trying, and even though they're very different ages, like in the real world, I feel like a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old, like you have a hard time like sort of like pairing two kids those ages off, because the difference in an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old is so vast. Like you're changing so much so rapidly at those ages. It's hard to, this is not like a 13 or 14-year-old who could just be friends. Like this is a little bit different. But of course, this is the post-apocalypse where Ellie's not maybe around a lot of other kids. She's excited to just meet someone who likes the same dumb comic she does, which is Savage Starlight, which is a thing in the game. It's like a movie and a comic book in the game. It's fictional, obviously, but this, I don't know if they mentioned that earlier in the show, but I think this was the first time it came up properly. But, she tells Sam some of her jokes, apparently, and it makes him laugh, and Henry's like, oh, that's the first time I've heard that. And Joel apologizes for calling him a rat, because, you know what? Like, maybe you're right to be wanted by them, but if you did whatever you did to save him, then on some level, obviously Joel can understand that clearly all of a sudden his initial judgment is complete bullshit, and he feels very differently seeing him protect his brother, because all of a sudden, again, this theme of like protecting that one person in your life, it's another example. These brothers are another example of this, just like Bill and Frank, and then other examples where someone's already lost their person, like Kathleen and her brother, like Tess was to Joel, and to some extent. So again, everything is so thematically relevant. Everything is building on those core central themes of these characters. And I was almost gobsmacked that they just get out of this like tunnel area and get out into the suburbs, because like there's so much action there in the game. But it makes sense, they're saving it, and obviously they had their big idea here to integrate the big clicker attack. And we've not seen any clickers since episode 2, so it was quite exciting to see them again. But yeah, the sniper part is really fun. It's, there's a sniper up in a house at the end of the street, and they're all ducking. It's actually really exciting to see Ellie sort of scared and not want Joel to go because he might get hurt. Joel's got a solid logic as to why he won't get hurt, and he's sneaking around. He's going to like flank him and get in the house. But he's like, hey, do you trust me? And she doesn't actually answer. But again, these are bonding moments. These are going through big, actiony, big, traumatic experiences. In fact, this entire ending of the episode is going to be very traumatic. But there's some key things here that are really important. So the big change here is that enemies do show up in the game when you like get to the sniper, and then you're up there, and it is a part in the game where you're literally you get the guy's sniper rifle, and you start like protecting Ellie and the other two as they're coming down the street. That is very much something in the game. But here there's more context for it, because this guy in the sniper tower was like someone who worked with them and is called in Kathleen and that. So they come in with trucks, they come in with everything, and there's like an army, like there's tons of them. It's a lot more big and bombastic, but they're kind of like combining this section with all of the combat that we didn't get in the city. So we get, and this is the part that felt just a little bit Hollywood to me, is that, Kathleen's having this standoff, she's talking to Henry, Henry's going to give himself up. And just then the truck that crashed because Joel shot the driver starts to sink into the ground, and the clickers and all that come out. Obviously everything wants the clickers and the runners, and the bloater. Jesus, the bloater looked great. The ripping the head off of the henchman dude was fantastic. So the spectacle here was great, right? And Joel, like, throughout the entire thing was always trying to protect Ellie with the sniper rifle. That was the great thing here, is that all this stuff's going on, but he's just following her with the rifle so that he can take out any clickers or infected that are getting close to her, and she gets into the car and all that. Some really good bits here. I think it's before the clickers, actually, just when the cars are running them down. But or maybe it's after. I can't remember exact moment here, but there is a moment where Henry leaves Sam and goes back and like helps Ellie up, which is a really important little moment here, I think. For after this, when Joel offers to Henry that they're allowed to, they may join the pair on their way to Wyoming. Like, because before, when Ellie brought up where they were going, Joel was like pissed. He's like, "Oh, you don't mention that to them. They're strangers." He's very defensive. He doesn't want to tell them their plan. But he offers, "Hey, you can come with us. Why not?" Afterwards, and I think a big part of that is because he saw that Henry did save Ellie. He saw that this is someone that he can relate to in some way. He's not the exact same as him. In fact, Henry points out that he's not a violent person. He's never used a gun. He doesn't have those skills. This is the sad state where he's the protector of a pair, but he doesn't have all these like harsh, like post-apocalyptic skill sets that all the other ones do, and that puts him in a really tough place where the only way he was able to protect his brother was to like trade and like barter and rat out people to the people in charge. Like that was the only options he had, because he was not built for scary combat. And that's pretty believable. He's kind of a much more normal person that maybe most of the viewers can relate to, I think, in a lot of ways. And it shows you how far gone Kathleen is. There is one thing I want to talk about here in a second spoiler section, for the spoilers for the game at the end, so I'm going to leave this scene for now. I'll come back to it. But I will point out that Kathleen said, "Big deal, we're not letting the kids go. Kids die every day. Tough titty. I'm going to do it." I'm pretty sure the clicker that got her at the end was a kid clicker. I think it was like a teenage clicker or something like that. I don't think it was an adult. Just for some irony on her death, I suppose. Yeah. So in her ending, like, it's fun and cathartic, but it also does feel a little bit more generic, and the sort of the villain of the the two-parter got her demise at the end. Whereas the end of the good characters, the brothers, is far more impactful. It is, it's heartbreaking, it's gut-wrenching, all those things. They're staying in a motel at the end of the episode. Joel offers that they come with them, and Henry's for it. But in the bedroom, when the kids are left alone after they've been bonding over their comic book, Sam reveals that he's been bit. His leg's been bit. And what was fascinating about this is, I think this is the first time in the story that Ellie has really had a chance to see what she could help stop. She's been told by Marlene and the Fireflies that you're important. We're going to take you to this lab to try and develop a cure. Blah 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 blah. But I think up until now she's been a fairly passive person on that trip. That's what she's been told she needs to do this. I think this here, when she sees that young Sam's been bit, she's scared, and her instinct is to cut her hand and say, "My blood is medicine, my blood can help you." And obviously, I think most people watching this are going, this isn't going to work. Even if your blood can save everyone, if it can create a cure, just rubbing your blood into his wound is not going to do it. Like, it's going to have to actually, go into a lab and be tested and mixed with other things probably, and whatever it is, right? It's not going to work. But her desperation in this moment, and like seeing that she could stop this, and she could have stopped this, and then the guilt that once he's dead, and the note saying "I'm sorry," I think this is a big part of her character, is that I think after this moment, on some level, she probably feels that she has a sense of purpose, that she should help to try and stop everything if she can, because this is the first time where she's sort of, especially since she's like known that she's immune, has met someone grown to care about them, and it's a very innocent person. You know, it's a child, it's a deaf child, and in this world who's been hunted by bad people. Like you couldn't get more sympathetic than this, and she's trying desperately to save him, and it's futile. But I think the fact that she really, really cared and wanted to is really sort of going to alter her worldview and like how important like her being used to make a cure is. And I think it's a big thing for her character going forward. Obviously there's a great touch actually here that I really liked at the end, where she wakes up after, you know, staying up and watching him like he asked, and he's facing the window, and she goes over, and when she touches his shoulder, he turns and he's infected and tries to bite her. What I really liked about this is that he has he's deaf, right? I like the idea that he intentionally looked the other way so that when he turned, he wouldn't just try and kill her in her sleep, because he wouldn't know she was there because he's deaf. It's not until she actually comes up and kind of like touches him that he becomes aware of her presence, because until that point he's just sitting there like a zombie basically. And what follows is just this visceral, like adrenaline fueled, like, emotional gut punch. It's this, you know, Sam's on top of Ellie, she's fighting him off. Joel goes to deal with it, but Henry grabs a gun, and for a second, obviously he's panicking, doesn't know what to do. He's trying to protect his brother, but obviously he knows the world that he's in. He knows what the infected are. He knows how they work. So after a couple of seconds of hesitation and like deliberating, he once again chooses to save Ellie. And this is the thing. You wouldn't necessarily blame him, right? But this is the second time in this episode he's chosen to save Ellie. The first time, he didn't necessarily put Sam in danger, but he chose to leave Sam up ahead a little bit where they ran to and come back for Ellie. Here, he chooses to shoot his brother to save Ellie. And then, of course, he can't deal with it, right? We have this tragic ending where he kills himself, and I think Joel knows it's going that way because Joel's begging him not to take the gun. In fact, talking about humanizing Joel a little bit, there's even that moment with the sniper where he's saying, you know, just put the gun down, kick it over to me, and just stay up here for like an hour, right? So, and you know, the idea being that they can get away quite far away before he moves and whatever, and that's it. And he says, please don't, you know, make your move to try and shoot me. And obviously the guy does, and Joel shoots him. But he tried to talk him out. he tried to not do the violent thing. And I think, you know, there's these moments of humanity, and I think Ellie in some ways bringing that out of him and feeling that hope. And obviously it's tested here at the end. But even more so, like I think witnessing Henry go through this, witnessing Henry lose the person he was supposed to protect and then not being able to handle it and then shooting himself, I think it'll both strengthen his resolve to protect Ellie, but also will also make him scared of being attached. It'll also make him scared that, you know, maybe if he has an out soon, he might want to take it. He might want to try and not get too attached because he doesn't want to be put in this position at some point. Because the pain of losing someone, and he's lost someone, you know, that happened at the start of the show. He lost his daughter. I think that like seeing this pain again and knowing what this guy's feeling. Obviously, he didn't shoot his daughter, but like 6.5 dozen really at this point. And Henry kills himself, and it's really sad. I honestly thought the episode was going to cut to black and just go to the credits on the gunshot. We get a little bit more, obviously, with them burying the bodies. And I think the purpose of this, obviously, is to give you this send off where they bury them not as enemies, but they actually take the time to bury them because they're, you know, they were basically friends by the end. And, you know, Ellie leaves the "I'm sorry" on the notepad on the kid's grave. I think just tying back to what I was saying about Ellie feeling maybe like she's determined to like use this like gift, you know, for lack of a better word, that she's been given, is that she's the one that says to Joel, let's get going. She's the one that says, no, we start moving. Like, I think she has a fire under her now to actually try and do some good with what she has. And I think that's a big character beat for her, and it's all very interesting. So, yeah, all the main character stuff in here, as with last episode, was great. And the action was obviously really big and bombastic, and the bloater looked great. Like, I really can't fault that either. I think what I want to do now is give you a second spoiler warning for the game, because I want to talk about two things in this episode that are kind of building to some very specific things for the end of the season and for the end of the first game. So spoilers for that. If you're leaving now, thanks for watching. Go to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV if you want to support all the content. Always appreciate it. Thank you. But if you're sticking around, I'm going to talk about the game a little bit, and particularly the character beats in here that I thought were very interesting in setting up the end of the game. One, obviously, and I talked about the scene earlier, but to sort of relate it to the end of the game now, Kathleen saying that sometimes kids die and you have to accept that it's fate and you can't always save them, and you have to make the choice to sort of like give up your little brother. Obviously that correlates very well with the ending of Joel being told that he has to let Ellie die, and then Joel's choice to not let that happen. I think that's a big kind of like foreshadowing of that element, which is one of the better parts of, like, I think this inclusion here is kind of setting that up a little bit. Better than that though is the Ellie stuff. I think the Ellie stuff where she now cares about wanting to to help make the cure by getting to the lab, by getting to the Fireflies, and being used to help save the world and save more kids like Sam. I think that is something they have nailed so well here, because when she was like desperately trying to like put her blood on his wound, it sold me how she's going to feel towards the end of the game, even more so than I think the game ever accomplished. Like, I think there's some things in the game that are better, and there's some things in the show that are better. I think one of the things that the show has just done better than the game has is that I think in the game you don't really get her sense of like, I need to do this, like this is my choice, this is what I want to do, I want to help save people, this can't be for nothing. That comes up, I would say, really quite late on in the story in the game, where she starts to sort of talk like that and feel like that. I think this moment has like sort of like start that path in her mind, like in her character arc, really naturally in a way that I think really fits. Because in the game, you don't know that Sam has been bit until he turns. Like, it's kind of a shock thing that he turns, and it's this kind of scary moment. This idea that she knew and tried to help him, and then like he turns in the morning anyway, that was a change in the game, and a change in the show rather. And I think it's actually quite genius, because I think it sets her on her path as to why she's so motivated to try and help people, because she wants to help kids like him. And I think that's kind of fantastic. So yeah, I think those two things, especially the Ellie part, was a really nice kind of, again, seed for where we're going towards the end of the story. And that was it. That's all I really wanted to talk about from the game. I wanted to sort of talk about those things in direct relation to where the story is going to end up. So, and obviously everything with Joel making his choice as well about, giving up the kid for the greater good, or, saving her because he wants to save her. And again, either respecting or disrespecting Ellie's choice are big things at the end of the story. So they've really been like planting the seeds for all those like themes really well. Arguably, I think better than the game did. I think the game, like, there's certain moments that I think might, or sort of, like, I think the city part is like a better overall experience in the game compared to the show. But I think these dramatic sort of like subtleties and moments here are a stronger indication of where it's building her character arc in the show. So it's very much give and take, and they're both playing to their own mediums. And in some cases, the experience of going through the turmoil of a section of the game works in a way that the show can, and is arguably better because of it. But then there's other parts where the show adds these intricacies to the characters and the subtleties. Like, just in the performances, Ellie's reaction to the gunshots at the end, like, fantastic. And she's such a wisecracking little shit most of the time that like her being affected by it really does kind of land quite hard. So yeah, good stuff. Probably should have said that last part before the extra spoiler warning, but it didn't occur to me till just then. So no, very good stuff. It sucks that we have to wait a little bit longer for the next episode, because this one was early, even though it was nice to get this one early, if that makes sense. Very excited for what's coming next. And since I gave the extra spoiler warning, I can just say I'm excited to see Tommy's town next to the dam, and I'm excited to I can maybe see us getting to also the university, or whatever the equivalent of the university is, at the end of the next episode. I could see that all been in one episode, maybe. Just kind of depends how they play it. Because, we only have 4 episodes left, and I feel like you do all that in one episode so that you really want to, like, do a lot with the winter stuff from the game. Would be my guess. But maybe not. I don't know. It depends how they play it out. But I could see winter as a whole being 2 episodes, maybe. Especially if they're incorporating the DLC, which I think they are based on the trailers, the flashbacks to Ellie's Night of Being Bit. I could see that, like, filling out the winter section a bit, and that being 2 episodes, and then our last episode being last episode. So I definitely expect the university or whatever it is instead to be very condensed versus the game. I can see them really cutting down on that a bit, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they'll still flesh that out quite a bit. I don't know. But anyway, that's my thoughts on episode 5 of The Last of Us. It's been really great stuff, and I'm looking forward to more. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, and of course get me on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and support all the content over there. Or you can send a one-time super thanks if that's more your thing. But of course you can support us for free by simply liking, subscribing, sharing out the videos and stuff with others. You can get us on Twitter @mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And yeah, that's about it. So thank you very much for watching. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?